Creating a main menu. To create a main menu, first open up your 960 grid file from your desktop. Now let's show the guides with Control semicolon so we know how wide our menu should be. Then lock them with Control Alt semicolon so we don't move them by accident. Just in case that happens, press Control Z to undo. Select the rounded rectangle tool. I'm using the hotkey U and Shift U to scroll through the other shapes and adjust the radius to 4 pixels. The bigger the radius, the rounder the shape will be. At 4 pixels, it's almost square, so there will be a subtle roundness to the menu. Make sure you have Align Edges checked. Choose a blue color from the left side. Now start from the left side and drag all the way to the other side, giving the shape a decent height. Close the guides with Control semicolon. Now press Control A and center the shape by using Align Horizontal Centers, just to be sure you have it perfectly in the middle. We need to check if the edges of the shape touch the outer guides, so we need to zoom in real close. Press Z and zoom in. If the menu isn't as wide as it should be, align it to one side, then press A for the Direct Selection tool to resize the shape. Start from the inside and drag out. Hold Shift and do the same for the other corner. Now go to the edge and drag. Hold Shift to make sure you drag in a perfect line. Why are we using this technique and not Control T and drag? Well, we have round corners, and if we do that, the corner radius will no longer be 4 pixels and the shape will lose its nice roundness. Let me exaggerate a case so you can perfectly understand why this is necessary. I'll make another shape, make a copy of it, and use Control T to drag and expand. I think it's pretty obvious that the Control T method is far worse. Now we have our basic shape, and we need to add some text. Press T to select the Type tool, and here we have another thing you should always keep in mind. If you go over the shape, you'll notice this cursor with a round shape to it. Click, and you'll write inside the shape. This isn't the way to go. You should click outside the shape, right, and move it into place. Or you can use a somewhat complicated hotkey, which is Control-Shift-H, and then you can write over the shape. Check the cursor after you've used the hotkey. Now the symbol is no longer a circle, but a square. You might think that remembering Control-Shift-H is quite complicated, but in CS6 you really need to use it because of the following reason. Let's say we have this shape here, and we want to add a light gray stroke to it. We'll go to the FX panel, like I like to call it, and select Stroke. Get a light gray, set the size to 1 pixel, and as you can see, well, actually as you can't see, the stroke isn't clearly shown because of that highlighting action. To get rid of it, of course, you need to use Control-Shift-H. Getting back to the text, write a couple of items and have 1 space between each of them. After you've set them all, go at the end of the item, press space a couple of times, select the empty space, and then paste it between the other elements. This is how you make sure you have the same space between each menu item. Use the Enter button from the right side of your keyboard to commit the changes. Select both layers by using Control and center them by height or vertically. The vast majority of menus start from the left side to the right, so you don't need to center the text horizontally. The text is looking very basic at this point, so open the Character panel. You should have it on the right side, but if not, just go to Windows, Character. Here, let's set the font to Arial, bold, 16 pixels, white, with a sharp anti-aliasing. As time goes by, you'll use better fonts, but for now, we'll keep it simple. One thing to note is that navigation items should have small type. As a rule of thumb, Arial 16 is pretty good, or Arial 13 with all caps is another good way to go. The mistake most designers make is setting the font to something like 30 pixels. Having the text small makes the element more elegant. Of course, we don't want to hinder the visibility in any way, so this is why we always use strong, contrasting colors. For example, never use a yellow background with white text. In this case, although it wouldn't look that good, black would be the best option contrast-wise. This is why I generally recommend you stick with fairly dark background colors and pure white text. When you're in the color picker, make sure you click and drag all the way into the top left corner to select white. Its code is FFF. Make sure you don't pick something around that value since coders will look for an exact color code when implementing your design. Now let's make the menu look nicer. First, let's add a gradient from the FX panel. You can either create your own, or you can use a predefined one that you got from the web. Let me show you a quick way to get a nice, simple gradient. We have blue as our foreground color. Go to Gradient, click and select the first one. Go to the other end, click on the small icon, and select the same blue, only make it lighter. Now we have a nice 3D effect, which is dead simple to make. Let's go to Stroke, and again, we'll select the existing blue, only maybe a slightly darker shade. The size should be 1 pixel, and it should be on the outside of the shape. Now, we'll go to Bevel and Emboss, and we'll get overwhelmed by all the options. Funny thing, we only need to change the size from 5 to 2 pixels, and instead of black, we need to change this color to blue. Easy and no headaches. Of course, you could do a bunch of other things here, but that goes for almost every tool in Photoshop. Make sure you always close the styles attached to a layer by pressing on this icon. A good thing to know is if you have multiple layers with effects on them, you can select them all. Press the arrow, and all of them will either collapse or expand. Now that our menu is starting to catch life, we need to add some separators between the menu items. This is optional if your items are very far apart from one another. The technique is quite simple. Select the Line tool from the left panel, make sure the weight is set to 1 pixel, zoom in real close, and drag a vertical line from the top of the menu to the bottom. Change the color to black. Duplicate the shape by pressing Ctrl-J, press V, and move it 1 pixel to the right. Change the color to white. Now drag the opacity all the way down to about 10 or 20%. The dark line is usually more close to 10%, while the light one is more close to 20%. Of course, these percentages really change based on your background, so what you need to do is to adjust them according to what you see. What we want to do is create a separation effect, a line that cuts through the menu. Usually, it's best to zoom in and out to make sure you're doing the right thing. After you're happy with it, select both lines and group them with Ctrl-G. It goes without saying that you should constantly rename your layers and groups. The only exception is the text layers. Now we have one separator, and we need to center it between 2 menu items. We'll press M for the Marquee tool, and make sure we have the square one selected and not the round one. Zoom in real close, and drag a shape between 2 items. Then press V, and if you have the separator group selected, you should be able to center it by using this tool. Now we have our first separator done. We need to do the same for each item, so to speed things up, we'll use Alt, Shift, and Drag. What this does is duplicate the group while moving it in a straight line. After each one, you should center it. When everything is done, group all the separators into one folder and call that, go figure, Separators. To give it that extra edge, let's get a cursor from iconfinder.com and drag it into our project. Let's create the hover state for an item. To do that, press T and select an item. Go to the Character panel and let's change its color to something that shows the hover state. Something like this, maybe. Get the Marquee tool by pressing M and drag a shape like this, between 2 separators. Now go to the bottom, next to the FX panel you already know and love, and press this small icon. Here we'll use an adjustment layer, but don't worry about the name, just select Brightness and Contrast. This menu will appear, and all we need to do is adjust the brightness, either up or down. Play with it to get a hover state for your menu. You can do the same thing for the down state, which shows the page you're currently on. Let's say we're on the home page, so we'll just use Alt, Shift, and Drag and copy this effect. Only this time, we'll make it the opposite of the hover state. I like to make the down state darker and the hover state lighter. Rename as always, and we have a great-looking main menu. But just in case you want extra visibility for your text, select its layer, go to the FX panel, and select Drop Shadow. Here, I recommend you use something along these settings. 1 to 2 pixels for distance, 1 to 2 pixels for size, and color-wise, you should go for a darker color than the background has. In this case, a darker blue. You can play with the opacity and make the shadow more or less obvious. And there you go. With a few simple techniques, you get a good-looking main menu. And you've just learned a bunch of hotkeys, do's and don'ts. Of course, this is only one type of main menu, but it's probably one of the most common menus you'll make in your projects. Be sure to practice, practice, practice.